Welcome back to my channel. Today I've decided to hide against the heat wave that we're experiencing in Kenya. But apart from that, I would like to introduce the cordyline, or what you call it, the tea plant. Now this tea plant, the name actually gets itself from Hawaii, but it is a great indoor plant and it's a great outdoor plant. Now the reason why it is such a popular plant in gardens, it's all about the foliage. Now this is when you look at this and you see the size of their leaves eventually, and they do get very tall, and when you group them together it is so dramatic. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Alice and I'm the Red Soil Gardener. As I mentioned, it's the pop of color, especially with this variety, because there are many different varieties of cordylines. But this is a beautiful color because it's almost burgundy, and even as it does go, the foliage does spread, you get so many beautiful designs on the leaf. Let's look at the requirement with light. The cordyline, or the tea plant, does like full sun, but it can actually work in partial sun. But once you do have full sun, the color becomes more vibrant, as in this sort of look. If it is in a shady area, what happens, it does start losing the brilliance and it may even turn green. However, if you do have your tea plant and you want to have it as an indoor plant, again, make sure you place it somewhere near a window where it can get the sun coming in. Because again, without the sun, the brilliance does go and the leaves may turn or revert to green. Now, what sort of soil does it like? It's very important to have a well-drained soil. It can do well in loam, it can do well in clay, but for as long as any sort of mixture you have is well drained, this is what it likes, because it doesn't like to have the water around the roots. Initially, as you do plant your tea plant, is in the initial stage, do water it a lot, because keep the soil moist. But once it does take off, what you do is give it less water, maybe every 2 weeks. If it's an indoor plant, do your finger test. However, if it's outside, as it has matured, it is quite drought tolerant. So all in all, as we look at our tea plant, it is very easy to look after it. It's one of the easiest plants because once it does take root, it does look after itself. Now, when you do plant it outside, just make sure that you don't have it really close to your house, because always try to give it maybe 5 meters, because the thing about the rooting system, it is quite vigorous and it is quite, I will show you, is that there is a lot of roots happening and it may interfere or damage your wall, so do keep it at a distance. Now the other thing is that because the rooting system, when we do look at the roots, you'll understand, is quite vibrant, is that when you do plant it, this is in a small pot, but I will eventually move it to a larger pot. What the cordyline likes, or let's say the tea plant, is it likes to have depth. So if you do decide to have it in a container, do make sure that you do have depth, because once you do have to transplant it, if you decide to move it, the roots don't like to be moved. So do have the depth in your container, or even when you're outside, don't plant it close to your house, plant it further, because once again, it doesn't want that rooting system to get disrupted once it's established. The cordyline is actually very simple to propagate because all we have to do is a stem propagation, and it does work very fast. Now, the beauty about the cordyline is that as you cut, you will get side shooting, a bit like the Dracaena, which we did before, is as I cut this stem, I will get baby shootings happening. And also if I cut this stem, I will get shooting on the side, which is great, especially if you do have a cordyline and you want to make it really full. By cutting it at the top, you will get all these side shoots. But for propagation purposes, I am actually going for this stem here. So all I do is get my scissors and I'm going to cut here. The thing is about this plant is you have to cut it below the node. And so what I'm doing is actually looking at all these circular marks on the stem, and that's where the node is. So basically just go below the node and snip it. And this is what you get. And actually it is quite interesting as I look at this cordyline or tea plant, is because I'd actually another time snipped the top, and this is your side shooting, the baby coming from the side. So now we have our stem ready for propagation. Now there's two methods that you can actually do with the stem. Now there is one method, which I don't usually do, is you can go and just take the bark away, just like that, scraping it, the bark away. And basically what happens is you're making it easier for the rooting to take place instead of going through the bark. But at the same time, you can skip that because I don't usually do that. You can just put it straight into soil or into water and you will still get rooting. Now, as I mentioned earlier about when you do your cut on for propagation purposes, try to go into a bit on the hardened stem, because if it is a green stem it may not work very well, but try to get again the harder bit of the stem, and that's where you'll do your clip and for propagation purposes. Now what I'm going to do with this one is you could actually put it in water, or you can actually put it in soil. So I'm going to do a soil propagation by simply taking the plant and, oh, I better scrape a bit from the back, is taking the plant and just, this is damp, is sticking it in the soil. So once I've stuck it in the soil and the soil is moist, I'm going to put it in a shady area, not full sun, because if you do put it in full sun, as I've seen with one of my propagations, is that the sun at the moment is very, very harsh and it will burn the leaves. So I will keep it moist. I will keep it in sunlight, but dappled light, sort of not direct sun. And I'll keep it moist until I see a rooting taking place. And then from there we do the same. We introduce it into a slightly bigger container. When it's ready to go outside, take it for a few hours outside to introduce it to the environment, and eventually you can plant it or put it in a container. So now we have a soil propagation here. Now this is my soil propagation that I did a few weeks ago. Usually it takes about a month to start getting to see the rooting. And these have been in this container for about a month and a half. The leaves have started forming, as I see little baby leaves coming up. And these are the old leaves. But let's have a look at it and see how it's going. So I'm just going to uproot it here. Oh, it's a bit deep. Look at that rooting, done in the same method as I've done this particular one. And as I mentioned earlier, is the thing about the cordyline or the tea plant is that basically the rooting system is so vigorous. Look at all that. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, is that as the plant grows and you do plant it near your house or near a structure, be very careful, because as it matures, you can imagine how strong those roots would be. So do keep them at a distance. So we've seen the root structure for that, and that was a soil propagation, and you see how strong those roots are. Now I want to show you another one, is that, so this is a soil propagation. Now this is my water propagation, where you can actually see the reality of the roots. Now this one has been with me, I think, for about 3 months, as I was contemplating, do I do an episode now or later? But just look at that rooting system, and that is about 4 months, I would say. But look how strong it is, and this is a water propagation. So you have two choices: either to go with a soil propagation, where the rooting does happen very fast and they are strong rooting, or in this case you can do a water propagation, and look how strong those roots are. For overwinter preparation, what you do is that if you do have your container outside, do bring it inside the house. And again, it does like light, so make sure you do find a sunny spot where the plant will be happy. For those who live in an area where the temperatures are really colder, and the plant is outside, let's assume it's on the ground, I would actually try to insulate it, put your support and cover the plant. However, if spring does come and your plant is pretty injured or damaged, all you need to do, again, as we know with this plant, is that once you do cut it at the base, is that you will get your side shoot and your plant will start again. So that is a really good way of actually reigniting your plant. The other thing is that when you do group them together, is make sure you're watering the soil and not the leaves. The problem is that you do get, once the plant does mature, you do get an abundance of foliage. And if you're planting them close together, you may end up with a mealyworm, you may get spider mites, or you may get leaf scales. But if you do get into that situation, just use either neem oil or soapy water to remove it. So it is important that you do water the soil. And if, for example, there are a lot of those plants together, try to water it during the morning hours, so even if the water does fall on the leaves, is by the afternoon it dries up and it's not going to sit there and start attracting all these pests. So thank you, fellow gardeners. Have a lovely, lovely day. Thank you for joining me on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe, press the notification button, do share our episodes with friends and family. And do know that we are on Instagram. Put your comment, I'm always there to answer you. And I do love receiving your comments, it's always so uplifting. And have a lovely day, and do get yourself one of these. Summer is coming up.